Well, welcome back to the Ropes Family Podcast, episode 48, which we didn't give a title to. You already know what the title is, listeners, because you're listening. But as we're recording, we haven't come up with a title for it yet.
Okay.
But what we're going to be talking about is discipleship. I know the very first episode we recorded on this podcast was we answered the question, what is discipleship? But in this episode, I want to talk about it a little differently. But to get us started, Courtney, can you talk about or give us the definition of discipleship?
Yes, Google AI says discipleship is a spiritual journey of learning and following Jesus Christ. It's also the process of becoming more like Jesus.
And that was the Google AI version, right? So now Google is starting to talk about discipleship in that way. But we're going to get into it in a little bit after we kind of give some things. But what we're going to be talking about is practical discipleship. In the last few episodes, we've kind of hinted towards this about practicing our faith. It's called sanctification, being more like Christ. And in sanctification, it doesn't happen overnight. It's a lifelong thing. It goes from conversion all the way to the end, and it starts at conversion, but it doesn't stop there. Like, it's not becoming more like Jesus isn't just getting saved one day,
right?
Placing your faith in Him. It's an actual process that happens to you over the time of the time of your life. It takes practice and it takes work. Like we said, practicing your faith and taking work and putting the work in to grow that. We've talked about that in the last couple episodes. This is the result of that.
So practical discipleship is what we're talking about, right?
Yes.
So do we go off the verse Matthew 28:19?
Yeah.
Therefore, go and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father and of the Son and of the Holy Spirit.
Yeah.
So do we have to leave the country
to make disciples?
Yeah.
I don't. No, you don't have to.
You don't.
You can. Making disciples is go therefore and make disciples of all nations, and you start in where you are.
Mm-hmm.
And you could think about it as from us as parents or us as believers. I have 3 little kids that I can make disciples.
Mm-hmm.
That I
Right.
can disciple as a family unit. It's important that we start there, right, and then we go out and make disciples from there. It grows out of the family.
Mm-hmm.
That's one way you can look at it. Other ways. There's other ways to look at it too. But
Right.
just as a from a family perspective, you look at it from there.
Okay, so I really liked how you came up with, I don't know if you came up with it or what, but different types of discipleship.
Yeah, when I was thinking about this episode in particular, I was trying to, what are the different types of discipleship that we see that are common? And these are just brainstormed things. I didn't research this, or I came up with this basically, or from experience. This is what I've seen. So the first one is relational. The second one is teaching, and then the last one that we'll talk about is intentional. But relational, you can look at discipleship as, walking alongside someone and teaching them in the way they should go. We talked about that a few weeks ago. And we do this by example, like it's a lot like we practice our faith with them. Like we've talked about this in the last couple episodes. It even goes as far as, like, as an example is a dad practicing or playing catch with their son, or a mom doing whatever moms do to teach their kids to do things.
Whatever we do.
Yeah, and I think you came up with some examples of those. So can you list off of those? I'll let you start off with the moms / women.
I did mom/women for the first relational thing, and being present in your household and in your friendships.
So what does being present mean? What do you think that? How can we be present in those times?
To me, it's just being there and being willing to listen to them and I want to solve everything. And it's more like listening and then helping them through stuff and not just automatically trying to solve whatever it is, giving my opinion on everything.
Yeah, and just not being absent and enduring the trial or the time with them, if good or bad.
Right.
I have this podcast episode title in my brain, "Presence is the best present." You know, and that's there's few things better that you can give your kids is your presence. You know, they want to be with their mom or their dad. They want you to be around. And right now, my kids are little. They want us to be around. They want to show us all the things.
Two of mine still want me around.
Yeah, and when they get older, it'll be the same. You know, it's a cycle of that. You know, sometimes your parents aren't cool, but sometimes they are. You know, for sure. But yeah, presence is definitely a good present for your kids.
And then I didn't just do like with our kids, but discipling like with our friends, be willing to have those hard talks, like the questioning your faith or questions about life or whatever. Just be willing to, once again, be present with your friends and be willing to talk to them or talk through things with them. Yeah.
And friendships are a big deal. It's so easy to not have friends.
Yeah. It's much easier to not have friends.
It's way easier to not. And it's easy just because everybody's so busy. You know, I don't want to bother them with this or, you know, hey, I tried to go to lunch and then you can't go to lunch. I've actually been really lucky and been able to have lunch with two of my friends in the last couple of days. And it's been a great time.
Yeah,
like just being able to catch up and talk with a buddy, and just kind of talk about life. We didn't talk about anything. Yeah. We talked the whole time, which was good. You know, it's just kind of good to have those friends that you can talk through things with and just kind of be regular. And you know, your spouse can fulfill that role sometimes, but there's a point where, you know, my spouse is not going to understand what I'm thinking as a, you know, she's trying to the best she can, and I'm trying to understand her the best way I can. But sometimes you need a buddy or a friend that can come and step in and disciple you and call you up towards the right direction and call you towards Christ instead of the other things, the other way, the other direction.
That's the one thing I pray every single morning for my kids is for them to be lights and for them to lead people towards God. And Allie said the prayer of their morning, and it's the first thing she said was, "God, help me lead people to you." And I was like, wow. Oh, good. I'm making a difference.
Yeah, and sometimes discipleship doesn't it doesn't happen overnight. It's a constant thing of doing, for sure. That was really sweet.
I thought it was sweet. So another way is like making food for your family. That's such an easy way, but it shows like moms. I know dads do it too, so nobody get offended. But some moms show love through making food. I make bread all the time. We all know that. And I'll make it for anybody and everybody. It's just how I show love. Here, I made you bread. I love you. Here's your bread. So that's just, to me, making food is like being the hands and feet of Jesus. You're showing your love.
Yeah, you're serving.
Yes.
Part of being a disciple is serving people, you know, and you're showing that by example. For sure, you're being relational. Just
like cleaning your house or showing up for your family.
Yeah.
Loving your husband. I had like loving your husband like publicly. That's what I had written on here. But
public display of affection.
Yeah, PDA. No, but loving your spouse, either husband or wife, like publicly, like out loud, like make sure your kids know. We talked about this last week. Like make sure your kids know that y'all love each other. And it's not just like, oh yeah, my parents are married. I never see them show any affection, but they're there.
Yeah, and that's a great point of being a disciple is you know, like we talked about in that podcast, is marriage is a part of sanctification. You know, our partners are supposed to help us be more like Christ, and the same also. You know, that we're co-disciplers and we're discipling each other as well as our kids. That's a good point.
All right, so let's move to dads.
Let's see what you think.
Not that I've ever been a dad, but I said leading your family, providing for your family. Those are obvious ones.
Yeah, and those are, you know.
Not that women can't.
No. I think God, he directs and specifically appoints men to do this. It's not because women can't. It's just that's the role that God has designed. And I think that this, you know, leading your family, we talked about it. It's different than what, you know, men aren't called to be. We're called to be disciples, right? And a disciple of Jesus is like Jesus, is to become like Jesus and teach our families to be more like Jesus. And that's what leading your family and providing for your family looks like, is providing those things to that. And also like providing, income and other things.
Right.
But I think that that providing and leading your family spiritually is probably top priority.
Mm-hmm. And I think that families where the dad will take over that, hey, let's go to church. Hey, when the dad is, actively, leading their family to that, it's a much different family to me.
Yeah. I think that there's a statistic somewhere that I don't know the exact number, but if a man brings his family to church, they're much more likely to stay there. If a man is involved in doing it, instead of just mom taking the role.
Right.
If the man is on board, if the man is supportive in leading his family in that, then it's much more likely that they will continue to do that for generations.
I like that. So I also said, guys, loving your wife. We already talked about that. Taking care of your kids, helping with the household chores, making dinner, taking kids to activities. That's all service. That's all showing Jesus to the world.
Yeah, it's part of having the relationship with our kids. Taking care of them and loving them. That's discipleship. That's showing them how to grow up in the way they should go. Yeah, I agree with you on those for sure.
Okay. Now kind of everyone being kind to that person who just really isn't your type or just really is not, y'all don't mesh. And that to me, if you can be kind to that person and show Jesus regardless of what is going on, I think that's major discipleship.
Yeah. And that taking it from that role is you're showing your kids more, you're showing those people that you're discipling how to treat people that don't necessarily agree with you, and that's a good point. I think what he did, showing respect to the slow waiter. Yeah, that's a good one. That's a good one to show.
Or how you respond to that waiter. You're showing your whole family or your friends or whoever you're with, your responses.
Yeah, and our kids are going to remember, oh man, Dad was really mean to that lady that one time. We don't want to go back there.
Yeah.
Or whatever. It takes a lot for me to be mean to or rude to a waiter. I don't think I've
ever seen you been.
I don't ever
rude to anyone.
I have been before. I promise.
Once.
But it takes a lot for that, and so that example is kind of tough for me to kind of work on. But as far as being kind to the grouchy cashier, I have been the cashier before. And when people are kind to me, I will go out of their way to do that, to serve them a little bit better. Hey, I know things aren't going as smooth as you want them to do, but I'm doing my best. And if you're nice to me, I'm going to be nice to you. And I'll probably have a better outcome for you because, and if I can tell, and this is really funny, this is off subject, is Allison and I were at lunch the other day, and there was two ladies sitting at a table, and you could just tell they were Christians by the way they were dressed. I was like, Allison, those two girls are definitely Christians. You can just tell by the way they are. And I'm not going to describe their clothes, but you could probably put yourself in this situation and understand that they're Christians, and and I tell the youth kids all the time, is you may be the only version of Jesus somebody sees in that day, right? It's one of those things, and discipleship looks like teaching your kids that, so, and acting that way all the time, being intentional in those acts is the important part. Also, representing Jesus well is important as well. So it's good. Yeah, and then the next one was teaching, and so this is what we do at the church. This is kind of maybe not just our role, but this is our role when the kids come to our church. We teach the Bible. We give direction for them. We basically help them understand the playbook of the Bible. We give them context. It's kind of like watching film or whatever. We kind of just give them a good starting place for when life hits them, because life is going to hit them. Or just like when the other team runs a certain play, you're going to know what that looks like, and you're going to know how to react. That's kind of what our goal is here at the church as far as discipleship. We want to train and equip as much as we can and have the relationships as much as we can, but it's like the youth group has 40 kids coming on Wednesdays, and so does the kids ministry. That's 40 on one, right? There's only so much relational discipleship that we can do. That's why it's important for parents to do this. But we won't go too far into that. But that's kind of what we do. We do it as a overall kind of umbrella. That's our goal here, I think.
I agree with that. And some of the ways I came up with, obviously, teaching Bible class.
Yeah.
Helping serve in the kitchen.
Mm-hmm.
I know sometimes they're shorthanded if you jump in there and you're showing, your kids and others that, how to be the hands and feet of Jesus.
Mm-hmm.
Volunteering in youth, the nursery, all of that, teaching.
Yeah.
And then, of course, I love missions, so take that mission trip.
Yeah. I think that's a big deal. Is that's part of going therefore and making disciples.
Yeah.
You can look at that like we talked about at the beginning. Going therefore could mean going to another country, or it could mean going to the grocery store. Mm-hmm. What it means is being intentional and doing it wherever you are, wherever your feet are, is to go and make disciples. Go therefore, go where your feet are and make disciples, and do those things.
Okay, in 1 Timothy 4:13, it says, "Until I come, devote yourself to the public reading of Scripture, to preaching, and to teaching." Mm. And I feel like Paul is telling Timothy to keep going, to be intentional, to not let everyone look down on him. Obviously, the verse before that is, do not let anyone look down on you for your being young. But I think we can apply that to our lives too. Mm-hmm. I mean, be intentional with what you're reading, what you're saying, what you're preaching.
Yeah.
I mean, we have kids that look up to us every single Sunday and Wednesday. They're looking at us for, leading them to heaven. Yeah.
We're called to devote ourselves to teaching the Bible. And that's a big responsibility. Mm-hmm. And it's not just a pastor's responsibility.
Right.
It's the same thing as parents read this as parents. Devote yourselves to public reading of Scripture. Devote yourself to representing Christ, to teaching your kids this Scripture, reading the Bible over them at night, during a family worship time. Read that for them. Devote yourself to do that. And I think that's a good point. I like that. And then speaking of Paul and Timothy, here the next type of discipleship that I brainstormed was intentional. And so this looks a little different than relational and teaching. It's kind of both put together. Mm-hmm. Like Paul and Timothy, Paul intentionally trained Timothy to take over for the work that Paul was doing. Like you said, until I come, devote yourself. And so Paul is saying to Timothy, I'm going to come back, but until I do it, do this, what I've trained you to do. I'm going to come back and support you and help you out. But do what you've been doing, It also looks like one-on-one accountability, My youth pastor growing up, he would tell us that he had another guy he could just share with, that they could, share each other's burdens, help each other grow spiritually, disciple each other, find somebody like that to do that. And in doing that, you can focus on certain points of growth that you need, having somebody call you up, hey, how is your walk with this going? Or, hey, have you read your Bible? What did you think of this certain section that we're reading together? Mm-hmm. Read a book together with somebody, or set aside a weekly time to talk to somebody and let them know how your week's going. And that's part of having a good friend for sure.
And I think being intentional with accountability is also being able to take, like, hey, how's it going with whatever you told me you were dealing with? Or being willing to ask someone. Mm-hmm. We talked about whatever. How's it going?
Yeah. Follow up with people.
Yeah.
A lot of times, if you mention something in passing to somebody, it's almost an invite to check up on them later. And how appreciative of that is. There's a certain deacon in our church that always asks me, "How's the kids?" Because he knows I've got 3 wild children. And I think he looks forward to the crazy answer I'm going to give him. Mm-hmm. But, and it's just nice to know that somebody that's not in, like, like not in my daily life, is still
Right.
asking how my kids are, how I'm doing, you know, genuinely interested.
Right.
You
And
know,
waits for an answer because I know
Yeah.
who you're talking about. And he'll sit there and wait for an answer. You're like, good. He's like, well, how's Billy's cross country? You know,
Yeah.
he'll ask more if I don't
Yeah.
keep talking.
And that's so good. And you feel loved that way.
Yeah.
It's a good thing. And he's intentional about it.
Very. I know. I thought about befriending an adult or someone who needs a positive Christian role model. And we have a friend that, she's lived a pretty hard life and she was needing that. She was looking for something. She was craving something. And not that we are, I'm talking about me and my sister, by the way.
Okay.
Not that we're perfect or anything, but we have done a lot more study and we went to a private school growing up. And so we know a lot more Bible than she does, I guess. And she was looking for that. And so we took her under our wing and we kind of started, you know, sharing as we could.
Uh-huh.
And it was wonderful. I mean, the friendship has since ended, but while she was with us, it was very intentional.
Yeah.
Like the things we would say, you know, she would be super negative about something or talk about something that's happened. And we're like, well, you know, talk about, you know, throw in a Bible verse or talk about, well, God prepared you for that or whatever. So I thought that was very intentional. It's very needed in our lives.
Yeah. And I it is very needed to disciple somebody too, like you taking them under your wing. That helped you grow spiritually.
Yeah, it did.
And as well as them.
Challenged me too.
Yeah.
To have to dig in my faith when she would question stuff. She wasn't quite sure about all this Christian stuff.
Yeah, I understand.
And so she would start questioning and I was like, oh, not sure I can answer this.
Yeah, and we'll talk about that here in a minute. It's okay to not know everything.
Yeah.
Because it's an opportunity for you to practice your faith and to grow in your faith. But back to taking somebody under your wing, my youth pastor did this for me growing up. And my life is completely different because of it. You know, and it wasn't like he was taking me and we were talking about Bible verses every single minute. You know, sometimes we would go fishing or we would go mow a yard together or we'd play disc golf.
Yeah.
You know, it was just that was discipleship. He was just showing me what a dude does, you know, and that is one of the biggest impacts of my life is that, you know, he just took me under his wing and one day I told him, I think I want to be a youth pastor one day or I want to be in ministry. He's like, really? That's really cool. And so he kind of just changed direction and showed me a little bit more, gave me more opportunities to be able to live out this calling or flesh this out, figure out what exactly I want to do or what exactly God is calling me to do and what's next, you know. And Donovan does that today. You know, I've been lucky to have people like that throughout my sanctification, throughout me growing as a disciple of Jesus, to have that. You know, Donovan does that without even knowing it, really. Sometimes he's a little bit more intentional about it, but, you know, and I've been really, I think I'm good at just kind of picking up from other people and looking for my iron to be sharpened. You know, I'm great at that. You know, I'm great at asking follow-up questions to people. Like they mention something and I could ask a question and just let whatever they say just sink in and dwell in, you know, for sure. And so I look for that a lot. And that's helped me immensely for sure, grow as a disciple. And we've been talking about discipling and discipleship can be very daunting. It can, especially if you're talking about discipleship of Jesus, you know, like teaching people to be like Jesus. That can be a daunting task. But I just want you to take your mindset and change it a little bit. You know, like just look at it like this. If you don't know where to start discipling your kids, you already are discipling your kids, you know, and just your daily life. It may not be discipling them towards Jesus. It may be discipling them towards whatever sport you have them in whatever practice, you know, you send them in, or whatever. You might be teaching them to be a good teammate. That's discipling them to be a good teammate. So just take your focus of those and be intentional about it towards Jesus, you know, teach them what it's like to be like Christ instead of teaching them how to be a good teammate all the time, teach them how to be a good Christ follower. And out of being a good Christ follower, you'll learn how to be a good teammate. And because we're all discipled by something, and I think that's one of the first things we ever said on this podcast. We're all disciples of something, and so, and whatever we're disciples of is going to be radiated out of us. It's going to reflect, and our kids are going to know it. The people around us close are going to know what we are, what we're discipled by, what is forming us. Like I'm wearing a Texas Rangers hat right now. Because I'm a Texas Rangers fan. You would know that if you looked at me. You would think, okay, Josh is a Texas Rangers fan. I'm a Chiefs fan. I wear Chiefs hats. I wear, just the things that I wear, the things that I do represent what I follow. That's just an example of those things. So you are already being a disciple and discipling your kids in those ways. It just takes a shift of focus, being intentional about Jesus in your faith. But that's really... And so I want to encourage you, you're already doing it. It just takes being intentional.
So the family challenge.
Okay. So the family challenge is to find somebody to be discipled by and find somebody to disciple. Like you said earlier, when you were discipling your friend, you also had to grow in your faith, and also they were growing in your faith. And that's the design of it, is everybody growing together, having somebody more experienced discipling you, and so you can pour out to those who you are discipling, and everybody grows that way. All right, that's all we got this week. 48 episodes. I'm really enjoying this. I think we're having a good time. We're going to come up with some more podcast ideas. If you have a podcast idea, send it to me or Courtney, and we will maybe talk about it. And then we can maybe work something up. We'll talk at y'all later. Peace.